Hey guys, it's me, back with a brand new video, and one that I've been looking forward to doing for quite a few months, ever since the last Monster by Mistake episode was uploaded. I feel like now it's time to do a top 10 of all my favorites, now that all 52 of the episodes are now live. So I can say that it is kind of hard to pick because I know that a lot of you love Avatar The Last Airbender, which is actually my favorite cartoon above Monster by Mistake, and a lot of people have a top 10 favorite for that. So I thought, let's start this off with one of my own, with a cartoon that not as many people talk about. So I'm also going to include some honorable mentions at the end of this video, and there's a chance that this is going to be divided into two parts, because I'll probably have a lot to say. I generally do have a lot to say, like I'm proving it right now. But in the meantime, yeah, let's just get started, because I'm really looking forward to sharing all these with you. And also, you're not going to be seeing me, you're going to be seeing some footage. Hope you're okay with that. But anyway, I thought that it would be a good change of pace from my usual videos. So without further ado, let's get started with number 10. Number 10. Starting off our list is the Season 1 episode Monster A Go-Go. Now, for a while I was debating between this and Campsite Creeper for number 10, but at the end of the day, I thought, even though Campsite Creeper has just wonderful backgrounds that it probably took ages to put together and model Carl's Colossal Campsite, I had to go with this one because of how much more heartwarming it is. You see, while escaping a candid Billy, Warren as the monster bumps into pop idol Lena, who ends up, rather than being freaked out at seeing him, ends up taking a liking to him. However, Billy, as the only antagonist who knows Warren's secret identity, both does and doesn't, in a way, trick Lena into going to Warren's house, but Warren is unable to tell Lena the truth because that would expose him to his parents, and he isn't sure if he's ready to let someone else know about his secret identity. Then, Lena believes Billy and Warren played a prank on her and made fun of her emotions, and just wanted to meet her personally. And this is where this episode's true magic is revealed. Monster A Go-Go has something to say about the lives and statuses of celebrities, how people tend to see them as influencers rather than people like you and me. Tracy and Johnny begin to believe Lena's a brat after she lashes out, when she believes she's been tricked, but Warren insists she's a good person, and they agree to help him make it up to Lena regardless of their disagreement. And Lena, realizing the secret, and surprisingly being completely willing to honor Warren's wish to keep it secret, plus that very fun and splendidly animated music video at the end, puts Monster A Go-Go at the start of the list. Number 9. Taking the number 9 spot is Lights Out. This was one of the last episodes I ended up watching, and I gotta say, the opening itself gave some real hysterics, diving the viewer into this strange request from Dad without explaining what's going on. It was a prank that had me laughing out loud and made me want to convince my dad to do the same joke on my sister for me. It would really be hilarious, and I'd really want to get it on tape. Anyway, it starts off with that cleverness, and then just gets better and better. Tracy and Johnny both end up fed up when Warren and Kibo pull another prank, but meanwhile, Morgul has gone to Kibo's homeland, Sordek, and has harnessed the same power of the land that Kibo uses daily to transform and be his hyper-goofy self. So, the gang has to have a trek across Fenrath to stop it, with Kragon, played by George Buza, who would go on to play Sloppy Joe in Grossology as one of his many roles, out to get them. What I loved about this plot is how much more it dives into Fenrathian geography, from Stinkweed Grove to Sordek to the mentioning of Gorham Range. It makes Fenrath feel like a real place with big potential adventures. And the cherry on top is Kragon's role in this episode. He agrees to help the gang stop Morgul when he realizes Morgul is so power-thirsty and delusional in his quest for power that he's willing to blow up probably half of Fenrath, including Kragon's home. Kragon is still clearly not a daisy in the garden, but it shows how money and power aren't all that matters to him, and that he's willing to stop and think about what's right on occasion. Also, the message about overdoing pranks is golden too. Some pranks are funny, but overdoing them can backfire and it would be all your fault. Lights Out gives two good messages with one of the most spread out episodes in the series. Number 8. This number 8 spot goes to the Season 2 episode Thin Ice. Now, my sister has played hockey for more than half her life, so I was at first very excited when I found out this episode was going to be about skating and a big ice show. And also, this was an episode that was released before all the other episodes were known to be around. So, there was a lot to really like, but there's much more underneath this frosty surface. You see, the Pickford Ice Follies are about to be underway, with the main event displaying skates from a world-famous skater. Then, a Russian named Ivan Malevich says he was the coach of the owner of the skates, and agrees to coach Tracy for next to nothing because of her impressive talent. Then, when Warren accidentally crashes a session, Malevich decides to coach Warren too, but Tracy was so excited about the idea of being coached personally and earning the lead part in the Ice Follies that she and Warren begin fighting over who should be the star. All of this is fine and thought-provoking, but what I liked more was the twist. It was supremely clever, and when I realized I was a step ahead of the characters, I still remember my gasp. It was very clever. I just wish the twist was revealed a little later than it was. Then this would have been higher on my list. But Thin Ice makes up for that slight thing with a very fast-paced third act with beautiful light direction on the stage, fun magic spells, and a resonating message of teamwork. Number 7. The next episode on the list is Mind Your Own Business. This episode begins with Warren playing with a new toy car he found under a bush. Tracy tells him the car already belongs to someone and they could be missing it, so he has to find out who. But Warren calls out hypocrisy, saying the jewel wasn't originally Tracy's, nor the Book of Spells. Tracy ends up taking this to heart, and Warren accidentally persists her to go to Fenrath to find the original owner, if it wasn't Morgul or Gorgul, that is. The three of them and Red realize the jewel was originally found by an ogre, and the only one left is named Thrimlik and has an intruder gobbling reputation. But Tracy persists, and Gorgul and his servant, their first appearance since they were sucked to Fenrath, follow. And soon, they not only meet Thrimlik, but are completely sabotaged by him, who admits to being the original owner of the jewel and the author of the Book of Spells. And when some misunderstandings arise, he ends up lashing out at Tracy and the group, and this lashing ends up backfiring until he realizes Tracy and the gang helped him with this backfire, and that they're not like all the others who have trashed him and disregarded his feelings. Now, Thrimlik was played by James Rankin, and he was unbelievable. In this one episode, he brought himself up to the same level as Mike Myers at playing these mythical beings. Thrimlik talks about how everyone he's ever met just wanted to steal from him, and how he's been living in a stuffy cave his whole life, and that's why he ended up the way he was. And you see, to pull off this message about how it matters how you treat and judge people and take their things, the show creators needed a passionate actor to deliver these thoughts, and Rankin was perfect. The other message it delivers is when Thrimlik ends up crushed by a boulder while trying to bury the gang in a rock avalanche. And despite all the magic at Tracy's fingertips and her ability to keep them, she decides, despite Thrimlik's aggressiveness, to help him and return his things. I think this moment in Monster by Mistake will ask viewers of all ages and circumstances to stop and look at themselves and wonder what they would have done, and then ask again to wonder if they just lied to themselves. It's a real treasure. Plus, even though the entrance to the cave ends up deliberately blocked off at the end, the possibility of finding more magic jewels was still open by the time the credits were rolling, giving future possible findings. I really like it when stories do that. Number 6. Taking the halfway point on our list is the episode that started it all, now known simply as Pilot. Billy ends up stealing Warren's toy car, a car that actually does belong to him. But Tracy convinces Warren to chase him down with her, and Billy leads them into the old Amberson house, where they find Gorgool. Realizing Warren picked up the jewel that his servant dropped and went out looking for, Gorgool tricks Warren into reading from the book in an effort to help him so that he won't suffocate, he says anyway. But the spell, wrinkled with a sneeze set in it, accidentally zaps Warren and starts, well, everything. What I love about this episode is its roots. How Mark Meyerson and a very small team of animators and producers made this by themselves in a time where 3D animation was still in its infant years. The rest of the show was the same way, but the rest of the episodes were made with more money and a bigger team, and this episode was released simply as a Halloween special all the way back in 1996. Yet it still managed to look very pretty, especially the dusty and rightfully haunted feeling of the Amberson house. I also love Warren's jubilism at scaring Billy. Being able to scare bullies is a joy in life people dream of, and being able to see it here felt good. But my favorite thing that the creators did was their handling of introducing Johnny. Here's a confession. Johnny Be Dead is my favorite character ever. I'm not just saying that. He's lovable, hilarious, wonderfully voiced by William Colgate, who I talked to for a journalism assignment once. He was so awesome, by the way. And Johnny manages to disintegrate stereotypes of ghosts the same way as Casper, but in his own special way. His introduction to Warren and Tracy was at first startling, but then very cute and heartwarming. I'm very happy the Halloween special was effective enough to launch the TV series a few years later, making it so the end was really the beginning. Number 5. Soapbox Derby. Warren and Johnny are minding their own business and having fun building a soapbox car when we're introduced to a new antagonist, Wesley Whiffington III, who's bribing Billy to push him across town for hours. Wesley begins bragging about a car his father got him out of some snotty magazine and laughs menacingly at Warren's homemade creation, to the point where Wesley dares Warren to race him in it the next morning. Warren realizes he has to accept, or he'll be mocked by Billy and Wesley both for a very long time, and his agreement puts him under extreme pressure to build a racer that can somehow win. Now, this is an episode where I feel there was a very serious responsibility here to make this episode well. If Warren ended up losing to Wesley, or somehow losing to Billy, and the message was to try to convince kids that winning isn't everything, it would have also given the message that independent creations cannot beat pure money, especially when you're going against spoiled brats who have all the money they need. That's a toxic message that probably only Teen Titans Go or something would ever put up. When Warren's dad says Warren should never have agreed to race Wesley, he ends up so mad and belittled that he doesn't want anyone's help. Not Johnny's, not his, not Tracy's, and says nobody understands what he's going through. I related to Warren instantly, and recognized how everyone else thought he was being petty when they weren't willing to stop and sympathize with his turmoil. The banter, the acting, and the dialogue, and especially the final race, made me really care about who was going to win this competition, and I got super invested. I also loved when Warren eventually had a change of heart and asked for his dad's help in rebuilding his original soapbox, as well as the fact there weren't any magic spells used during the actual race, making the end result of the race feel authentic. All of this was more than enough to earn Soapbox Derby a high spot on this list. And just a very personal favorite. They're both the same thing, I guess. Not to mention it elaborated on the message that cheaters never win. Number 4. The next episode on this list is none other than the Season 1 classic Home Alone. Now, this is the one episode I've talked about so far that doesn't have a message attached to it. And I think pretty much all the messages in Monster by Mistake are not only important, but have a method of delivery that transcends to all age groups while also not shoving it in our face and ruining the actual adventure. But sometimes you just need to have a little fun with what you can do with animation and a story centered around magic. I have to say, when I saw Tracy lift into the air, I could have sworn I'd seen it before, which was weird because I only remembered watching one Monster by Mistake episode as a kid and it wasn't this one. But look, when I was 10, I asked Santa Claus for the power to fly, And to this day, I have dreams where I can flap my arms and lift up into the air, or jump high like a rabbit or a grasshopper. Do you ever get dreams like that? There are also a few other touches to this episode. Warren takes allergy medicine, which ends up backfiring, preventing him from sneezing back into Warren, with Aunt Dolores hunting the monster down. When he first takes the medicine, and this is my point, I didn't get the impression it was going to go anywhere, but it fooled me. Another thing is, Johnny's not a part of this, and because of the things that end up happening, this gives Warren and Tracy extra challenges to sort out the mystery of what is going on in the house without having someone who can both fly easily and go through walls. Flying easily, come to think of it, that would have maybe undermined the amaze of Tracy being able to fly up. But mainly, it was all the flying and how reminiscent it made me of my childhood that landed this episode up at number 4. And if they were honoring the Macaulay Culkin classic by giving it this title, well, it's, of course, very few things can stack up to Home Alone, but this one, I mean, good try, and a noble try. The flight really adds so much to it. Oh, and before I forget, this scene was hilariously terrifying, and if we didn't know who this monster was, yeah, I would have been pretty... Actually, no, I wouldn't have been freaked out as a kid. It would have made me look at other things I was scared of in cartoons and made me think, it's probably not that bad. Number 3. Taking the number 3 spot is the crazy extravaganza known as Leapfrog. I think this is by far the most fast-paced episode of the series. It's definitely the biggest game of Leapfrog you will ever experience. And this time there are 4 different antagonists: Morgul, Kragon, Billy, and a 2-headed Doberman. Warren ends up accidentally getting carried away with a cool game called Battle Gyros, on the day where he was supposed to come home right after school so both he and Tracy could get to the museum for a very important press conference at the museum their mom is a part of. Not only do the two of them end up too late to even research a spell to zap them to the museum, but Billy wants revenge for beating Warren, slowing down the route they were supposed to take. But they decide since Fenrath is a parallel universe, plus the fact time is slower there, they can go through Fenrath to where the museum's supposed to be, and not be late by jumping back out again. The rub is, Morgul, Kragon, and the half-fierce, half-semi-cute dog are chasing them too, unable to catch a break. Now, one flaw about this story is noticeable. According to Warren, and admittedly Kragon, the time comparison is this. 1 second in Pickford time equals 1 hour in Fenrath time. The only problem is, this means from the time I started talking about this episode, 2 Fenrath days have passed, and I thought about how long Red and Kibo would have to wait, let alone age, to hang out with our heroes. I did some math, and an Earth year is 8,760 hours. If those hours were actually seconds, that would equal 146 minutes, and this means with every 146 minutes that go by, 1 year in Fenrath has passed. Therefore, for every full day on Earth, 24 hours, 9.7, almost 10 years have gone by in Fenrath. If I was the writer, what I would have done is say 1 Pickford second equals 15 Fenrath seconds, so every 4 seconds equals a minute, you know? I felt that would be less radical and allow the story to flow pretty much the same way it did. And I got the impression the writers came up with the second hour thing so it would flow properly with this story. Of course, I feel this is something not many people will think about in the long run. Everything else in this episode is flat out perfect, from the slight role of Aunt Dolores corresponding with the main plot, from some very exciting chases, to a few fake-outs when everything seems like it's going to be okay, to making a big cinematic adventure over the idea of being late. Now, I'm a bit of a procrastinator on a few things. In fact, I wanted this video out like a long time ago. But I feel everyone occasionally procrastinates on something, so I feel everyone will relate to having a problem with punctuality. Leapfrog is a creative blast of an episode I could rewatch loads of times, earning it the bronze spot. Number 2? The silver medal goes to Tracy's jacket. Remember when I said I found Tracy's flying in Home Alone familiar, but there was only one Monster by Mistake episode I was sure I saw? Well, Tracy's jacket was that episode. If I didn't see this episode, I probably never would have taken an interest in Monster by mistake, and either we wouldn't have ever gotten the series back, or it would have taken several more years before it became public. But I'm not going to give this episode this high a spot for just that. The pilot episode was both significant on the show's history and awesome. I'm also going to talk about Tracy's jacket's heart and excitement. Tracy's crush, Daryl Anderson, has more of an interest in Tracy's friend Susan, who loves to use poetic yet tawdry English with loads of four-syllable words: spontaneous, monumental, conflictual. And because Daryl has to hang out with Susan to help with an upcoming school dance, and no one asked Tracy to help too, she begins to feel unspecial, including around Warren and Johnny. So one day she ends up taking an interest in a goth jacket that's too expensive for her to buy, so she crafts her very own with the jewel in the Book of Spells to become one of a kind. I also feel this plot may have referenced the actual Monster by Mistake actors. Julie Lemieux, who voiced Warren, had been in loads of productions, and so was William Colgate, who played Johnny. Hilary Cooper, who played Tracy, however, didn't have any voice acting history to show off. Correct me if I'm wrong, but to this day, her only other role arrived 3 years later after this episode aired, as the receptionist in the Space Race episode of her husband Robert C. Cooper's big TV series, Stargate SG-1. Rewatching the episode made me sit back and wonder how it must have felt for Hilary, sandwiched in between two big-name voice actors and all the other side actors on the show. This makes me love the message of individual beauty even more, that you don't need to change who you are or succumb to pressure to be cool and welcoming. The jacket voice Hilary also played, and this was a shot for her to show how much more she can act, and she was, well, monumental. Her snarky and vilifying antagonist voice resonated with me even when I saw this episode as a little kid. Now, I know Monster by Mistake is not the most popular cartoon in the world, but whenever I ask around, Tracy's jacket seems to be the episode people remember the best, and I have a feeling this was the episode that aired most often. I think whoever was in charge of that decision made the right call. But there's one other episode that ended up topping the episode that started my Monster by Mistake's treasure hunt. Before we get to it, though, here are 5 honorable mentions that burdened me not being able to put them on this list. However, they would have made the top 15 somewhere, if this was a top 15. First, we have Monster on Purpose, for its introduction to Fenrath, after its prior 2 seasons just talking about it, its introduction to Red, its introduction to Morgul, and its embracing of being different. Then we have Brotherly Hate, for having some of the best action scenes in the show, for answering the questions for the missing pages that we got in Monster on Purpose, for having a good sibling message, and for having enough grandeur to be known as the final episode. Next we have Campsite Creeper, which you remember was a worthy contender for number 10, before Monster A Go-Go knocked it off. Campsite Creeper is on this list for Dad not believing the creeper is a guy in a suit, the gorgeous setting that looks and feels exactly like a forest despite all of this being modeled and animated in 1999, and for feeling like a legitimate adventure. Then we have Lights, Camera, Monster, which, like Thin Ice, talked about what happens when fame gets in the way of friendship, and like Soapbox Derby, this episode had real emotion, especially when Warren was humiliated during his audition for Wesley's movie. It was heartbreaking. And the last honorable mention is Warren's Nightmare, for showing the side effects of exposing yourself for those who are tired of keeping identities secret, and though I doubt it would go completely like this, there are some really depressing and effective ideas in here. Number 1. And after all that, the number 1 episode is Sasquatched. This was one of the episodes I got on DVD back before I managed to uncover all the lost episodes. And after this episode ended, I had a smile on my face for 2 straight days, and I thought to myself, even if I never manage to find all the episodes, and they stay lost media forever, at least we've got what we've got. An episode has to be very swell for me to look on the bright side that much. This episode starts off with a new camping trip, probably back at Carl's Colossal Campsite. And Warren doesn't want to go because it's allergy season, and not only does that mean a lot of possible monster exposures, but violent exposures with Aunt Dolores coming along too. Warren begins wishing there was someone else who felt discriminated against for similar reasons. And fun fact, the original creator, Mark Meyerson, said he originally wanted the monster change to be seen as a curse, a disability like having a lot of allergies amplified to harder lengths. I put it this way. Imagine a certain very rare mental disorder you have was now against the law, but it wasn't your fault you had it in the first place. This is how Warren feels. Also, Dolores is trying to prove the existence of a Sasquatch perhaps living in the forest. And actually, there is one. And it seems to be after the monster, but not on the general terms. Now, I always wasn't a fan of Tom, the dad. And if you caught my attitude before in Campsite Creeper, the reason I don't really like him is because he constantly says the monster is a guy in a suit. And people are entitled to what they believe, it's just the tone that he sets whenever he says it reminded me of those people who believe that those who pray are bonkers and refuse to respect their faith, you know? Maybe I'm being a little offended here, I don't know, just more like just annoyed. And at first he rolls his eyes as his sister Dolores talks about the Sasquatch and brings all her Sasquatch spotting equipment, but he then witnesses the whole thing face to face. Now, he witnessed some abnormality in Johnny's reunion, but it's a lot more satisfactory here. Also, back to my point about disabilities. This looks at the Pickford monster and what the world perceives to be monsters in general as animals. No, make that aliens. Things that don't deserve freedom, understanding, or consideration. This is a cartoon episode that looks at animal abuse and the basic idea of zoos. That's very deep for a kid's cartoon. Yet it played like a kid's cartoon, having all of the fun you could want, and all of the nice messages as well on top. This episode has surprises, exciting chases, an antagonist at first frightening but then ends up getting rid of our fears when we understand it, her, and an ending that gave me said smile on my face for 2 days. Now, logically, if this episode was made today, then the Sasquatch would probably be homosexual, not immediately seen as a girl when he tried to kiss the monster. But anyway, it was 2003 back then. You can take what you get. I thought about what it must be like for the Sasquatch to be all alone with no one to comfort, and the ending hug and gift was real television magic. Forget I even said that bad thing before. This whole episode was television magic. And you know how I always say that, well, you might not know this, but whenever I watch a movie or read a book or anything like that, I feel the ending is the most important part, because it's what you're going to remember and it's going to tie up any loose ends you may have. The ending was perfect. So much ends up happening in this episode, it could be made theoretically into a 90-minute movie perfectly, yet it never feels rushed. I have no idea how they did that. This is an episode that felt like half an hour, for all the good reasons. Episodes like Leapfrog, Tracy's Jacket, and especially Sasquatched, I think, are exemplary in children's entertainment. In fact, all of these episodes that I've mentioned, including the honorable mentions, are with their lessons, adventures, cuteness, humor, heart, and characters. They're all just top-notch. And Sasquatched is, in my opinion, the best of all of them. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed my top 10 list, and I've been thinking maybe I'll do my top 5 least favorite, which yes would be top 5 worst, but there are very few Monster by Mistake episodes I don't like. I just thought it would be a good project if you like this video and you were curious about it. So anyway, I'm looking forward to making my next video as soon as I can, and in the meantime, see you then.